Man, this is an okay problem to have when nobody wants to go back to their seats because they're busy loving on each other. I'm okay with that. Elisa says, period. That's her thing. If you haven't met Elisa, make sure you do. She's fantastic. Well, I'm going to get started and just make y'all feel uncomfortable for still standing up. How about that? My cheering section. I love you, baby. Wow. All right. Well, it is amazing to be here with you. As I was preparing my message for this week, it occurred to me that I haven't preached since last Mother's Day. I think that's right. So you'll have to forgive me if I'm a little bit rusty, but man, is it good to be in the house of the Lord? Is it good to be bringing the word to his people that are amazing? Y'all are the best. You really are. Pastor Tanner and his family are on their way to sunny Florida. Yeah? Hi, Pastor Tanner, and hello, Facebook Live audience. We are so glad that you're here, whether it's sickness that keeps you away today or this is just your normal thing. We're glad that you're here. But yeah, Pastor Tanner's spending some time in Florida, and it's a privilege to be able to give that time to him and his family and just bring the word for you today. So let's dive in. Do you know my daughter, Megan? Okay, so, all right. So you've seen her. You've maybe seen an interaction that she's had with someone else. Yeah, she's fun. She's joy. She's a joy. She's full of sass. Oh, man, is she great? Let me tell you. She really is. She really is. When Megan was 3.5, she was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. But even before then, Brian and I knew that there was something a little bit special about Megan. We just had to wait a couple of years to figure out what that something was. And it didn't change anything, obviously, about the way that we care for her or love her. But it does obviously change some parenting skills that we have. We have to maybe approach things a little bit differently. But with Megan, there are different, I call them seasons of life. As you know, other parents in the room, you might call them phases. You know, kids go through phases. Megan goes through a lot of different phases, a lot of different seasons. When she was real young, so when we were first kind of discovering more about Megan and kind of what made her tick, she went through a particular season of life that wasn't exactly my favorite. It was one in which she liked to smell people. And by smell people, I mean intentionally smell people. So I'm talking about sniffing people. And not always sniffing them in appropriate places, let me tell you. That was difficult to explain from time to time. But she moved through different phases from there. And right now we're in a season where she loves lanyards. She's maybe seen you wearing one. She's probably asked you for it if she has seen you wearing one. And some of you have just blessed her with lanyards on and off as you see her at church. It's wonderful. Thank you for loving on my daughter in a very special way. But that sort of morphed from, so we started with when she was real little, she loved just pieces of paper that were laminated with plastic. She loved that. And then it moved into ID badges and then lanyards. Now we're in like lanyards/keys. So we're like transitioning into a new phase. So now at any given time, you'll see my daughter with maybe a piece of paper laminated in plastic in her hand while she wears an ID badge on a lanyard with a key. So you see these things all blend together, right? But there was one particular season of life that I'll never forget. And it still kind of rears its head every once in a while, but she just really didn't like her hair. You know, my daughter has this beautiful blonde hair. It's fine, but it takes a curl pretty well. And man, I just don't really get it. But she doesn't like it. And there was a particular moment. She came to me one day and with all sincerity, she said, "Mommy, I want an afro." How do I possibly fulfill this request? So I picked my jaw up off the floor and I said, "Baby, I got to shoot straight with you. You do not have the texture of hair to substantiate and support an afro." She didn't like that answer. Of course she didn't like that answer. And she looked at me for a moment. She took a pause. She really considered what I had to say. And then she goes, "You know what? I'm going to pray about it." And what do I say to that as a parent? This is what I've been training her to do for her whole life up until this point. So I just sat back and watched. I'm like, who knows? Maybe I'll see a miracle today. And she screwed her eyes up real tight. And she said, "God, I ask that you would give me an afro in the name of Jesus." She's obviously been watching me pray too, because mommy really gets into it like that. And then she opened her eyes, and can I tell you, nothing happened. Nothing in the world happened. Her hair was just as fine, just as straight as it was a moment before. And in spite of that unanswered prayer, Megan was not deterred in the slightest. Not even a little bit. I don't recall her continuing to petition the Lord for an afro. I don't remember that being a thing after that, but she clearly trusts him with her hair because she would ask for it and still does to this day occasionally. She wants it to be brown, red, black, curly, wavy, fully braided, dreadlocks, pretty much anything she sees that her hair is not currently, that's what she wants. And why does she do that? Well, part of it is vanity. Part of it is just the fact that she's a little girl and she wants what she doesn't have. It's like that grass is greener mentality. You know how that is. But inadvertently, she seems to have latched on to what Jesus was talking about in Matthew chapter 7 when he says, what? Keep on asking and you'll receive what you ask for. Keep on seeking and you'll find. Keep on knocking and the door will be open to you. So believe me when I say that my daughter is asking, seeking, and knocking on the regular, and not just from the Lord. She follows me around like a puppy asking for things here and there, and I'm thinking, baby, it was just Christmas 5 minutes ago. There is like a 3-month moratorium on gifts, all right? Just so you know. But that's faith. And as I consider my daughter's tenacity and faith in the face of what we would consider to be unanswered prayers, it causes me to examine myself. What will my response be when God doesn't come through in the timing or manner that I think he should? I want to read a story with you this morning that really helps to illustrate this, and it's going to warm things up a bit. And I hope that you walk away from today with something not unlike I did as I dove into this word. I got to tell you, God spoke to me very strongly. Let's turn to Daniel chapter 1. We're going to start in Daniel chapter 1, and then we're going to leap ahead in the story, but we need to set a groundwork first. Daniel chapter 1, beginning in verse 1, says this: During the 3rd year of King Jehoiakim's reign in Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord gave him victory over King Jehoiakim and of Judah and permitted him, we see God's sovereignty here, that's awesome, to take some of the sacred objects from the temple of God. So Nebuchadnezzar took them back to the land of Babylonia and placed them in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, his chief of staff, to bring to the palace some of the young men of Judah's royal family and other noble families who had been brought to Babylon as captives. Select only strong, healthy, and good-looking young men, he said. He's the king. He wants the best. Make sure they are well-versed in every branch of learning, are gifted with knowledge and good judgment, and are suited to serve in the royal palace. Train these young men in the language and literature of Babylon. The king assigned them a daily ration of food and wine from his own kitchens. They were to be trained for 3 years, and then they would enter the royal service. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were 4 of the young men chosen, all from the tribe of Judah. The chief of staff renamed them with these Babylonian names. Daniel was called Belshazzar. Hananiah was called Shadrach. Mishael was called Meshach. Azariah was called Abednego. Now, you might see where this is going, but we need to jump ahead now to Daniel chapter 3. And I'm going to read this auctioneer style because there's a lot of text to get through. So if you want to go back and read it slower later, feel free. But we're going to fly through this morning. King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then he sent messages to the high officers, officials, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the provincial officials to come to the dedication of the statue he had set up. So all these officials came and stood before the statue King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald shouted out, "People of all races and nations and languages, listen to the king's command. When you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and other musical instruments, bow to the ground to worship King Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue. Anyone who refuses to obey will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." Yikes. So at the sound of the musical instruments, all the people, whatever their race or nation or language, bowed to the ground and worshiped the gold statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. But some of the astrologers went to the king and informed on the Jews. You know what snitches get? They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "Long live the king." Suck-ups. You issued a decree requiring all the people to bow down and worship the gold statue when they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harps, pipes, and other musical instruments. That decree also states that those who refuse to obey must be thrown into a blazing furnace. As if the king didn't know what he said. But there are some Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whom you've put in charge of the province of Babylon. They pay no attention to you, your majesty. They refuse to serve your gods and do not worship the gold statue you've set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage and ordered that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought before him. When they were brought in, Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you refuse to serve my gods or to worship the gold statue I've set up? I will give you one more chance to bow down and worship the statue that I've made when you hear the sound of the musical instruments. But if you refuse, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace, and then what God will be able to rescue you from my power?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, "Oh, Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to defend ourselves to you. If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He'll rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you've set up." So some of us know the rest of the story and some of us don't, so I'm going to do sort of a flyby version. Now, the king is totally unmoved by the faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, except maybe with rage, right? That's kind of his MO. So he orders the furnace to be cranked up 7 times hotter than usual, has his cronies throw the boys into the fire, and then does a double take when he sees not 3, but 4 men in the fire, one of them looking like, I don't know, Thor. You choose your Avenger, whoever you like. And the boys emerged unharmed, not even smelling like smoke. Nebuchadnezzar acknowledges that their God is supreme, makes it a law that no one even speak ill of him on penalty of death, and promotes Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Pretty cool ending to the story. We could just close it up, move on out. Faith, right? But we moved through that really quickly. And there's a moment that we need to go back to, and it is a critical moment. It's a pivotal moment. A moment in which I imagine heaven held its breath and marveled at the steadfastness of 3 young men, 3 boys, far from home. So now Scripture has blanketed us, right, with this understanding and a confidence and a comfort that if we submit to God, right, if I do all the things that God asks me to do, if I pursue righteousness, if I seek to understand his heart and his plan for me and for the world around me, there are some inherent benefits, right, where your prayer life is concerned. The word tells us that. Seeking after God means that your prayers are heard. And we read about that in James 5, where it declares the earnest prayer of a righteous person has great power and produces wonderful results. And that's an incredible promise, right? We want to have confidence that our prayers are going to be impactful. 1 John 5:14 through 15 tells us that we are confident that he hears us whenever we ask for anything that pleases him. And since we know that he hears us when we make our requests, we also know that he will give us what we ask for. But for those of us that have lived long enough to experience any kind of hardship, we know that God doesn't always come through when we think he should, or even in the way that we think he should. When I was diagnosed with cancer last May, legions of prayer warriors, some of the most godly men and women that I have ever met, immediately began to storm heaven and hell on my behalf, believing for complete, instantaneous healing in my body, that there would be no trace of cancer. And I stood in agreement with that prayer. Yes, I'm signing up for that. I know that my God is capable with just one touch, with just one word, it will be gone. So I signed up for that. I came right into agreement with you, my friends. But instant, full, supernatural healing didn't come. And for the last 8 months, I have endured painful exams, rigorous tests and radiation that's left my body weak and raw, a course of chemo that brought on what felt like a dozen small heart attacks a day, surgery that removed the tumor but resulted in weeks of nerve pain, sleepless nights, and what is still a bag of poop on the outside of my body while the inside of my body heals. Yeah. And now I'm smack dab in the middle of another course of chemo that rattles me daily with nausea and headaches and fatigue. And it leaves my mouth and my throat so sensitive to cold that taking a sip of anything above room temperature is like swallowing knives. And it threatens my hands with permanent nerve damage. It could leave me unable to play the piano when it's all said and done. And you know what? My story isn't even the saddest one in this room. I guarantee it. There are those of you that have walked through fires that I have never and will never experience. And I wouldn't want to be perfectly honest. We don't want these things. Do you suppose that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego wanted to go into the fiery furnace? I very much doubt it. I would be shocked if I got to heaven one day, met these young men, and said, yeah, we were tripping over each other to get into that furnace. I'm sure they would have loved an outcome in which King Nebuchadnezzar was moved by their faith and changed his mind. Or maybe a SWAT team comes crashing through the windows and grabs Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and whisks them away to safety. Or even the furnace stopped working or blew up and killed everybody except Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That would have been a cool end to the story. But that's not what happened. But that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted. I didn't want to go into the furnace. And church, if we're being really honest with ourselves and with those around us, no matter how strong we may appear, none of us want to go into the furnace. But as we look at the response of these young men, we see the faith and steadfastness that God is wanting to stir up and cultivate in his people in moments like these where all hope seems lost. So let's look at that response, because I want to break it down. And I want to leave you today with some tools to take with you so that you can respond to the furnace the same way that these amazing young men did. So let's do it. The first thing they say is, we do not need to defend ourselves to you. Church, this is about understanding whose opinion matters. Come on, have I got some fellow men and women in this room like me that tend to get in their head about what people think about you from time to time? I do. And I have to take that to the Lord every day. Now, there's a caveat to this, right? Because we know that God does place people in our lives over authority, that are in authority over us, sometimes whether or not we like it, and we're called to serve and to honor them. The Bible also makes it very clear that we are meant as brothers and sisters in Christ to seek to sharpen one another. And if we see our brother or sister in Christ doing something that we know is going to lead to death, we're charged to pull them back away from that cliff in love. Let me help you. Let me share with you how God has worked in me in that area. Let me walk through this with you. We're charged to do that. Be open to that sort of loving correction from your brothers and sisters in Christ. However, this is different. This youthful confidence that we see in this moment is akin to what Paul talks about in Romans 8 when he reminds the believers in Rome that this verse, if God is for us, who can ever be against us? So as you face these moments, when you're genuinely and consistently doing things God's way, you don't have to look over your shoulder and wonder if you have the approval of men. Because I promise you, friend, if you are following after God, if you are seeking his heart, you have his approval and only his matters. Amen? What do they say next? If we're thrown into the furnace, God will save us. That's the gist. So this is about understanding three things: God's ability, God's willingness, and the best part, God's desire to work on your behalf. He wants to do it. Hebrews 4:16 says this, let us come boldly to the throne of our gracious God. There we will receive his mercy and we'll find grace to help us when we need it most. God desires for you to come to him, to tell him every little thing that burdens you. His shoulders are big, I promise you. His shoulders can handle it. His shoulders held the cross to Calvary, and they are more than enough to carry all of those burdens for you. You're not going to shock him. You're not going to make him angry at you simply for being honest. Don't you think that a time or two throughout this journey, I have had some words with God, and they were not always words that I'm proud of. But he had grace, and there was repentance that followed. But he also assured me that I could just be honest with him. So please do understand his desire is to work on your behalf. And then here's the big one. And you saw the title of my message this morning. If you've been on Facebook this week, the title is this: even if he doesn't. Say it, church. Even if he doesn't, we won't bow. Understanding and acknowledging the goodness and sovereignty of God despite what we see before us. That is a hard statement to make. You're making a statement to God, and in the same breath, you're making a statement to the enemy. You're telling him that you won't bow no matter what he throws, because even if God doesn't arrive in the time that I think he should, nothing else is worth my attention. If we want to hold fast to the promise of Jeremiah 29:11, and so many of us know it by heart, I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for good and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. If we want to cling to that, we have to be willing to do it from the mountaintop and the valley. Our trust in God cannot be conditional on our circumstances. And let me tell you, that promise isn't just for you. This promise was spoken over a nation of exiled people, and this promise is for us today. So hear this. Sometimes your dance in the fire is for someone else's good. Because sometimes there is a King Nebuchadnezzar watching from the wings, who is suddenly going to be convinced, because of the way he has seen you dance in the fire, he will be convinced that your God is the Most High and that he's worthy of all the praise and all the glory. And he'll chase after him with all of his heart. Sometimes your dance is for someone else's good. Church, even if he doesn't. Now hear me. We still have faith, but this is faith supreme, because this says that God, I know that I don't have all the answers, and so I'm going to trust you even when it doesn't make sense to me. I believe that you are working on my behalf. This isn't a lack of faith. This is faith elevated. Even if he doesn't, he is still God. He is still good, and there is nothing else worth bowing to. So as we face the furnaces of life, we have to determine in advance. You will hear me say this again and again. It weaves through my messages, because it weaves through my prayer time, because it weaves through my conviction from the Holy Spirit that I must prepare in advance what my response will be. If you want your faith, if you want your response in a moment before a furnace to be as faith-filled as that of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you have to begin to prepare before the furnace is lit. As I spend time with God, he imparts truth to me. And this is always a common theme, again, because he knows me and he knows that I am prone to impulse. And whether you are or not, I can tell you this: if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. Proverbs 21:5 tells us that good planning and hard work lead to prosperity. Plain and simple. So you begin to pray this over your life. God, I want to be prepared when I face the furnace. I don't want to begin to prepare at the point that I'm looking down on it, ready to walk in, because that's too late. So church, let's plan for this. And worship team, you can come. At the end of his life, Joshua called the nation of Israel together and delivered a word to them from the Lord, in which he reminded them of hardships and battles and terror and enemies and long periods of waiting for promises to be fulfilled. But he also reminded them that God was with them through it all, and that there was always a victory on the way, even when it wasn't in their preferred timing. And because of that, Joshua could, with confidence, make his recommendation that Israel never again turn to anyone or anything but the one true God. And he drew a proverbial line in the sand that day and declared in Joshua 24:15, "As for me and my family, we will serve the Lord." Can we stand together this morning? As I look out across this room, I know that many of you are facing furnaces. Perhaps you feel as though you're already in one. And it's hot. And you don't understand it. And it's frustrating. Whether it's your fire or someone else's, perhaps you're watching a loved one walk through something difficult. You need to know that God isn't blind to that, first and foremost. He is the God who sees you. That wasn't just for Hagar in the wilderness, that's for you today. He is the God who sees you. He counts your hair. He bottles your tears. Nothing escapes his watchful eye. But you may find yourself in a season, maybe like mine, where you are walking through something so incredibly heavy that seems so mountainous. You know that there is no way that you can do this on your own. And you have questioned. You've questioned God's sovereignty. You've questioned whether he cares. And this morning, something in this word is resonating with you, that God is stirring within you to begin to place your trust in him again. Or perhaps it's for the first time. Maybe you don't know anything about this Jesus that we're worshiping, this God that we hold to such high regard because we know that he's the key to everything. And God is speaking to you this morning, and he is really, really begging you to trust him. And we're going to begin to worship this morning. And I love the words of this song. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades. And Father, I pray that that would be so true this morning in our lives, that we would have a deep understanding that no matter what is going on around us, we can have moments with you all throughout the day where everything else fades. And it's just us, God, because your light penetrates every darkness. Nothing can stand in your presence. And so, Father, we're going to trust that even when we don't see it, you're working. Even when we don't feel it, you're working. Even when we don't understand what's happening to us or in the lives of those that we love, we know that you have all of the knowledge and you can see it from beginning to end. And the answer is on the way. It just might not be when and how we think it should be. But God, we trust you. We trust you. because you're trustworthy. Because in my wandering, you were just waiting for me to come home. And in my season of sickness, where the enemy wanted to speak death, God, you continue to speak life. You continue to send men and women across my path that minister to me daily, that send flowers to my door when I need encouragement, that drop soup off at my door when they know that I need extra nutrients. God, you see me, you know me, and you see us, and you know us. God, we trust you. We trust you, and as we worship you this morning, we want to give of ourselves more than we ever have before. We want to lay down the doubts, not that they'll never creep in again, God, but we always want to answer back with, you know what? Fine, that's what I see before me, and I know that my God can save me, but even if he doesn't, I'm still not bowing. I will not lay down in the face of an enemy that wants to take me out. Father, I trust you. And so, God, we're going to worship you this morning. And we're going to recommit our trust into your hand. We're going to recommit our lives into your hand, knowing that you are far more able to do anything good with them anyway. We love you. Church, let's begin to worship together this morning. The prayer team is going to come. They are going to be here. We want to pray with you. We want to pray for you, because sometimes you just can't even pray for yourself, right? It's hard. And I've had those moments too where I just needed to literally lean on a friend that would just pray life over me. And that's what we want to do for you today. As much or as little as you want. It's not going to be a weird experience, but we want to minister to you. We want you to leave here knowing that you're loved and knowing that you're a part of this. You're a part of the body, and we're here to support you. Let's worship together today.